if you're into football, you've no doubt heard of Juventus FC, the famed outfit from Turin, known for playing in black and white, that's played home to iconic players such as Zidane, Del Piero, Edgar Davids, and so many other players. Then you're probably also familiar with this logo, and by extension the very passionate response that it got when it was debuted. So what's the deal? And what can we do about it? Founded in 1897, I Bianconeri are the second oldest active football club in the whole of Italy, having played all but one of the seasons in the Italian top flight. Originally called Sport Club Juventus, it wouldn't be until 1905 that they would switch from their initial pink colours and play in the iconic black and white stripes, as well as their renowned club crest. They went through a few different versions of this crest, and in 2017, they switched to the one that we're all relatively familiar with now. Now, this logo was quite controversial, not least because it was such a huge departure from any other crest that preceded it, but also because of the direction they chose to go in, doing away with the heraldry and stripping it bare to reveal a simple J that makes use of negative spacing primarily to make itself stand out. Now, to be completely transparent here, I actually was kind of a fan of the logo when it launched. It chose to move away from these really stereotypical symbolisms that are associated with football teams and tried to do something that was a little different. I'll also admit that the way that the logo was rolled out, with all of the slick implementations that usually come with these sort of redesigns, kind of sold me on the logo a lot more, which is kind of the point. It's supposed to make you feel more comfortable and that you're actually okay with this change. Football clubs have, in the last decade or so, and even a bit longer than that actually, been looking to make themselves more assertive, moving away from just being simple businesses and thinking of themselves more as global brands. And to that end, they weren't the only club that actually engaged in this sort of wider redesign and rebranding as a whole. But as time has gone by, I kind of felt that it hasn't aged that well at all. I started to have more and more beef than likes with the logo. For one, the logo isn't that versatile. It usually comes in either straight up white or black, and kind of means that you're kind of stuck in between this weird phase if you don't have a very contrasting background to apply it on. It also means that because of its simplicity, that unless people are really familiar with that logo, which is kind of a thing that it was supposed to address, they're bound to miss it. Moreover, since they actually ditched the logo type that came with the logo, it's kind of becoming even more of a abstract piece, which means that again, if you're not familiar with the sport, which it's trying to get you to buy into, you can feel as though you're still trying to make up your mind with what this thing is supposed to be and represent. But one of the greatest weaknesses of it is that the logo was too derivative. If you know anything about football and football history, you'll know that football clubs have always had this huge community aspect to them. A lot of the time they harbor many symbolisms which tie directly back into the communities that inspired them. And while the state of modern football has meant that communities have ended up being made as lesser priorities in the grand scheme of things, crests are the one instances where there's still, I guess, a sort of reminder of where these clubs come from. So to take away from that by making a logo that essentially disregards all of that history and social heritage was always going to be something that was going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. So what can we do about it? Well, let's come up with a little brief. We want a historical logo which honors the roots of a club, but we also want a modern logo that also is in line with current trends, and three, and most importantly, making the logo more recognizable. I think we all want something that we can tell apart. So without any ado, let's see if we can solve this a little bit. Right. I hope I'm doing this okay. I'll be real mad if this does not work. So we're just going to jump straight into Illustrator and we're going to make ourselves a lovely new file. And one of the things that we want to do before we actually begin on making all the exciting stuff we're going to do is actually populate it with some bits and pieces. We're going to make them import basically, and we're simply just going to drag in anything that's relevant. So I think, for example, it'd be really good if we have a list of all of Juventus's past logos, so that we can perhaps dig for some inspiration in there. Again, it's been quite cool seeing some clubs do that recently. And then we're also going to populate it with some other stuff that would be cool to add in there, and also something that we actually want to purposely avoid. Beautiful. I mean, we don't need to put that on the artboard, but we're just going to put it somewhere here. I read during my prep for this that the initial Juventus crest was actually inspired from the crest or the shield, whatever you want to call it, of the town of Turin, which is part of the reason why there was that blue in some of the earlier iterations of the logo. So let's also check that out. So we're gonna take this, pop it in here. I think something else that would be really cool to include in there actually for reference would be, so as inspiration, I actually like the way that the new Man City logo looks. I think this one takes a lot of inspiration from the town, and yeah, so it takes a lot of inspiration from the City of Manchester's coat of arms itself, and it's also quite historical. We're gonna use that as not as a base, but as something that will be of interest, especially because it's a lot more contemporary. Now let's actually change gears and go to what we don't want to do. So obviously, Juventus is one of 3 major clubs. Actually, there's a lot more than that. Sorry, Napoli. We want to include their logos to avoid, because not only are these clubs obviously very popular as well, but they also kind of have very, not similar schemes, but like they're kind of hard to differentiate. Like literally, Inter Milan and AC Milan both play in stripes, black stripes. They make use of different colors, but it's stripes nonetheless. We want to actually include these logos as references, mainly because it'd be nice to actually know to make the logo stand out from those designs. AC Milan has a sort of circular oval shield kind of going on, whereas Inter Milan actually has a more circular one, going on. We're just going to go and include this new logo in there as soon as I can find a we'll go for this logo. It won't kill us. It won't kill us. We got a big ass there anyway. So, my brother in Christ. One of the things that I was really keen on exploring was the form of the shield. First of all, it's so counterintuitive to the very form of every other crest that's literally preceded it, and I think that's the reason why it rubbed people the wrong way. I'm really keen on actually heading back towards a circular design. I think that's what I want to do for this, and also this sort of like really dominant type kind of in the center of the logo roughly, so that you can't miss it. I think one thing that I didn't like on the old logo, especially this one here from, which again dates back literally to the early 2000s, I wasn't a fan of how the text was just kind of arched. One thing that I'm also really keen on though is that I did actually like the type that they produced for this logo. It felt fresh, it felt different. Also, one thing I noticed actually is that these stripes, I mean, forgive the pixels, these stripes are not straight. It bothers me. It bothers me a lot. We're gonna fix that, among us a few other things, and we're just gonna get straight into it. So I've made it this far. I'm kind of happy with what I've done with the ball. the hint of blue actually gives it the additional colors that I was actually looking for. I think it actually turned out better than I expected even. I'm not entirely sure about the shape of the shield, but honestly, like, I'm happy with it. The strokes might have to be tweaked, but again, we're not getting into that for the time being. I think my main thing though is going to be, how do I find a way to insert the club title in a way that's actually, club name, in a way that's actually nice? Because I'm not too sure about how to do it right now. I'm not sure how I feel about making the ball so dominant, but I mean, I could. Let's give it a go. Let's see how that looks real quick. So I kept on chipping away at it and I hated myself for staying up so late, but eventually I got a resolve I was okay with. So for this logo, I have to say that the only thing that really inspired me for it was pure nostalgia, especially looking back at some of the older Juventus crests, that there was a real need to, I guess, get back to its roots in a way. I also thought that it was really important to kind of bring some additional colors and to shift away from that monochrome aesthetic. So one thing that I was really keen on doing really early on was to bring back that gold, seeing that blue was a color that has a lot of significance, and to really, again, allow it to be a sort of nice tie-in to the city itself. The next challenge was how I was going to be able to incorporate the name of a team into the logo, and that was something that I really had no direct idea on how to do. But then I realized something. The task of actually putting letters on black and white stripes is something that Juventus actually faces every season whenever it has a new kit. And so I looked back to some of their earlier kits and found that in a lot of cases they just opt for a simple color back for a section of the rear of the torso. They called it a day. But then I realized that there was something that just wasn't really clicking. Going back onto these early Juventus logos, one thing that the type did really well was that the type always kind of came and morphed into the shape of whatever element it was inside, and kind of keeping it just kind of plain stuck on there just felt really boring and, you know, plain. And then to nip it on the bud, I also made sure to include that nice golden underline, I guess you could say, but I also felt was like a nice addition to the 2000s logo. And finally, a lot of it was just kind of like really just tweaking on whether or not it looked okay, making sure that there was enough spacing between elements. I think actually that one thing that I've noticed myself doing in general is that I tend to not give quite a bit of my features enough breathing room. I guess has just about enough room for everything to kind of stand out, especially at smaller like resolutions. Thus concludes my logo redesign. I'm really keen to know what you think about this logo, as well as, you know, the current Juventus logo, and also what you would perhaps do differently. Be sure to let me know what you thought about this video by dropping a like. Do subscribe. I'll be sure to be posting a lot more content going forward, and I'm really keen on doing a lot more of these fun designs and redesigns of stuff. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.